Insche, Osio, Halito, Chukma, Aho, Hawaii, and welcome to Native Americans in North America, our final class for spring 2023. And in closing, we are going to go through some current events as well as an overview of how we keep track of current events in Indian country. The first thing I like to point out are the sites that I have used throughout the semester to keep up with Native news. The first one I will note is indianswithaz.com. And we are going to say, yes, we want to proceed. I don't think they have their security checkpoint all set up yet for their website. But if we do get to Indians.com, what you see is a very, very good list of the stories that are happening right now. And we see a Cherokee Nation story here, Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin there, everything from National American Indian Housing Council welcoming a new executive director, that's Chelsea Fish. The state of New York has banned Native American mascots in public schools. We'll have to talk about that in detail in another part of either today or another lecture. Tribal cannabis update from New York to Washington State, where tribes across the nation are exploring new economic development opportunities in places where cannabis is no longer prohibited by state law. So we can, there's also fireworks as Secretary Haaland faces Republican critic on Capitol Hill. A Republican lawmaker who was unable to derail Deb Haaland's historic rise to Secretary of the Interior had somewhat of a meltdown as he came face to face with the Native woman trailblazer. I wonder if there's video of that. There sure is. I think it's incumbent upon us to check this out.
The gentleman from Minnesota is.
Now, this is why this lecture gets derailed, is because as soon as we see something interesting, we want to see what's happening with it.
Recognized. Thank you, Mr. Secretary Haaland. Thank you for joining us today. Late last month, you testified in front of the Appropriations Committee. My friend and colleague, Mr. Reschenthaler, asked you about the mineral withdrawal in my district. You said, and I quote, "Well, we did a mineral withdrawal in the boundary waters," end quote. Secretary Haaland, do you understand why this statement that you made under oath is false?
Congressman, it is my understanding that we made a decision in this area.
Madam Secretary, I have to interrupt you. Do you understand why the answer that you made under oath is false? There is no mining in the wilderness area, and there is no mining in the surrounding buffer zone either. As the Secretary of the Interior and as a former member of Congress on this committee, you should have known there was never a proposal to mine in the boundary waters per the 1978 Act. Secretary Haaland, do you recognize the document behind me?
Would you like me?
Do you recognize that document? For those that don't know, it's the updated list of critical minerals released from your department last year.
Okay, yes.
Now do you recognize it?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, in your exchange with Mr. Reschenthaler, you said in reference to the minerals in the Superior National Forest that you banned, and I quote, "I don't know what kind of minerals were there. I don't think they were critical minerals," end quote. Well, as someone who works, lives, and recreates there, and as someone who has the privilege of representing the people that live there, let me tell you, those minerals that you banned include nickel, cobalt, palladium, platinum, and other group metals. Again, this is a list produced by your own department, Madam Secretary. And you told Mr. Reschenthaler that, quote, "I don't think they were critical minerals." That's unbelievable. Secretary Haaland, you claim the withdrawal that you forced upon my constituents is in the boundary waters. That's wrong. Do you now understand?
Congressman, I should have said that it was the Boundary Waters watershed.
Okay, so let's
Watershed
correct that.
area.
Madam Secretary, I only have so much time. Let me correct it. You either misspoke or misled in the testimony. Which was it last week?
I should have added the word watershed, Congressman.
You don't think that the withdrawal included critical minerals. Again, that's wrong. You had to be told that there were critical minerals. It was only after the hearing that you made the changes. And today, you're making the changes because you had no idea. When Mr. Reschenthaler was asking you, you had no idea that the withdrawal was not in the boundary waters, and you had no idea that there were critical minerals that you banned in the boundary waters. So how can you, as a Secretary of Interior, not know where the wilderness is? And how can you not know that your agency withdrew critical minerals? You own this decision to take offline massive amounts of critical minerals we need for everyday life and our strategic national security. Your decision, Madam Secretary, is either purely political or ignorance. It's either ignoring your own agency's research or a political move to satisfy your radical anti-mining activists. This ill-informed decision has left the United States more dependent on China. Now that you've been given the facts, and you are willing to rescind your order to withdraw the opportunity to mine critical minerals outside of the wilderness and the buffer zone?
Congressman, what I would like to say is that with respect to the mine that you are referring to, it was always called a copper mine, and copper is not on that list.
It has nickel and cobalt. It's the biggest copper nickel find in the world. In closing, I'd like to state for the record, this withdrawal, according to the Forest Service, includes a taconite and copper ban as well. And Madam Secretary, the Iron Range in northern Minnesota mines iron ore that makes 80% of this nation's steel. And you banned taconite. Taconite is included in the ban that you supported and signed. I'll enter my documents into the record. And again, it's frustrating that you made a decision without any knowledge whether there was critical minerals in there. And you made the decision thinking that the mining was going to happen in the boundary waters. You were mistaken. Per the 1978 Act, there was never going to be mining in the boundary waters or the buffer zone. Again, you had no idea when you made that decision what critical minerals were in there, and furthermore, you had no idea that we had project labor agreements to put union men and women to work for generations.
Mr. Chairman, has the time expired, or is there more hyperventilation that we need to endure?
I yield back.
I am given leeway to several others. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you for the clarification.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, if you would indulge a point of order.
Gentleman's recognized.
We have significant differences in terms of policy and philosophy on this committee, no question about it. But berating the secretary or any witness that we have before us, diminishing and demeaning the victim exactly.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
I think is inappropriate, and I would suggest.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Decorum is part of our.
I request the ranking member's words to be taken down. That's factually inaccurate.
I will save us the exercise of going through that and indicate to the gentleman that that was not, that my comments are directed in general and not specifically to anyone, but if he is offended by them, I apologize for that, but I don't apologize for the call for real decorum in this
Mr. Chair,
dais.
I respectfully request those words be stricken. That's inaccurate.
Mr. Chair, on what basis, point of clarification, on what specific word is sought to be struck?
We're getting to that.
Okay.
I'm trying to establish what those are.
The fact that a member has berated the Secretary of Interior.
That was factually correct.
That is not, it is absolutely not correct.
And that's being charitable. Berating is being charitable.
Mr. Huffman, I spoke the truth with passion. And when you speak the truth with passion and protecting my constituents, it's with passion.
We're going to take a 5-minute recess. The committee stands in recess.
And we're going to find out what berate means? Yeah, okay.
All right, we'll pause that. That's from testimony going on regarding Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland and having to do with the mine there. So we're not going to continue on that, but this is the kind of thing that I do every day, which is go to Indians.com and see what stories are happening. And it's a good way to find out what's happening around the rest of the country, not just here in Oklahoma. And the other one I would share at this point is ictnews.org, what we used to call Indian Country Today. And there, again, is a very good list of current stories going on. And here you see Deb Haaland under fire at Senate hearing, so that's making its way around the various news sites. Native Times for a long time was the go-to site for us for Native news related to Oklahoma. And there was a newspaper for a long time called Native News. And now there is still this website, and you can keep up with different aspects of contemporary events going on within Indian Country, as well as a job section here. And so you can look at that as well. I check it out pretty regularly. One other site that I would also share is the National Native News site. And you can go to this particular site, which is nativenews.net. And one of the nice things about this site is they have current stories every day and then audio accompanying each one of those stories. So today's story, advocates for Montana's most vulnerable residents are pushing back on a budget plan passed by the U.S. House, saying it would be disastrous for people already faced with trying to find affordable housing in the state. And this specifically relates to Native people because it gets to the HUD funds, Housing Urban Development Funds. And so it looks like there's also a story about a tribal college in Arizona there. And you keep going down and you see other stories. Trauma care at the Center of National Tribal Health Conference, Native Broadcast Summit celebrating 50 years of mass communicating, and so on. So that's another good site to keep up with Native news. Of course, if we're going to study any kind of contemporary issues of Oklahoma, we need to be aware of the tribal jurisdictions in Oklahoma, and you see them all indicated here with regard to the 38 federally recognized tribes that are in the state. In addition to that, the most recent boundary recognition that we have had to learn about and know more about are the reservations that were substantiated by the Supreme Court McGirt decision that indicated these reservation boundaries had never been disestablished. Therefore, Chickasaw Nation, Choctaw Nation, Seminole Nation, Muskogee Nation, Cherokee Nation, and Quapaw Nation are all still reservations. Some of the western tribes, Kiowas, Comanches, Apaches, Wichitas, Caddos, Cheyenne Arapahoes out here, those lands were, those reservations were severed once the allotments happened. But they either forgot or someone thought that, and we can only, interpret this from a distance of 140 years, basically, that Congress felt that once the allotments were done, these reservations would be disestablished. Well, according to the legal framework of the country, unless they were specifically designated as being taken away, they still exist. And that's the way it is. And that's created a lot of legislative issues, legal issues, and a lot of push back and forth between the state of Oklahoma and the tribal nations. We won't get into all that at this time. But we want to be aware of where these are. Two cases we're following closely is the one in the U.S. Supreme Court right now. We're waiting on a decision on this one, Brackeen v. Haaland. And I would also always say that if you want to find out what's happening at the Supreme Court, you go to the Supreme Court's website. And you can look up this particular case and look at the questions raised specifically. And we have talked about in our classes Congress enacting the Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978 to, quote, protect the best interest of Indian children and to promote the stability and security of Indian tribes and families, close quotes. The provisions establish default preferences for the placement of Indian children in adoptive or foster homes, which means they should go to a native home if possible. And the state is supposed to work with the tribes in order to make this happen. Well, a court case was brought up saying that this is unconstitutional because it's race-based law. And what we know from all of our study of Native American law is that Native people are political entities first as citizens of federally recognized tribes, and racial entities second. So that racial status comes second to political status. And we've talked many times about that, how there are people of different races in tribes. And there are people with no native blood in tribes. That goes back to history and how history unfolded with regard to enrollment and allotment. But the questions are whether ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, if its placement preferences impermissibly discriminate on the basis of race, and whether ICWA's placement preferences exceed Congress's plenary power over Indian affairs. We've talked about that before. That means Congress can essentially do what they want with Indian tribes. And whether or not ICWA's placement preferences impermissibly commandeer state judges to not be able to make the best decision on their own because they are guided by the Indian Child Welfare Act. So we're waiting on a decision on this one, and it should be coming anytime. The other local current story, of course, we're following very closely is Oklahoma House Bill 1027, which is going to authorize gaming in the state on sports. And so I've been following that closely. And the last legislative post we had was way back on March 30th, where the Rules Committee and Finance Committee were taking their shots at it. But so far, it has moved along pretty well. And we'll just keep following this story. We'll see here if by the end of the session that it becomes law. And of course, there's a lot of money to be made if sports gambling passes. And of course, the tribes are set up to be the intermediary of that gambling. And really, how much money comes through is going to depend on whether the legislature decides on mobile gaming only, or in location gaming only, or going to add mobile gaming to that whole thing so you can do it on your phone as opposed to having to go to the facility. We'll see what they say. One of the things I like to do is a local nation check. Here we are in Claremore on the Cherokee Reservation. So of course we always check in with Cherokee Nation first. And one of the easy ways to do this is to go to About the Nation. And then I typically will go to the newsroom. And that way we can see some of the stories happening. Increased scholarships mean a stronger future for Cherokee Nation. And the Cherokee Nation is raising the scholarship amount students can get to help them with college. Cherokee Nation, Cherokee Cultural Community celebrate grand opening of new community center in Dewey, our friends up there north of Bartlesville. Cherokee Nation taking applications for summer youth employment program. Cherokee Nation's broken ground on Stillwell Housing Edition for Cherokee families. So a lot of good stories here that you can keep up with. And of course, there are two Cherokee entities here in the state, the United Kituwa Band of Cherokee Indians, a smaller group than Cherokee Nation. And I see here that there's an open submission for 8th grade, high school, college, military, and tech grad profiles in the upcoming June edition of the Cherokee News. And I don't see another story right now. This is the actual newspaper. And let's see. And I'll tell you this, though, Lonnie Hansen, she's a former student of ours at RSU. So she's involved with that. And these are stories from back in April, so I won't go to those. I think we looked at one of those before. Also, my friends and relatives over at Muskogee Nation have a very dynamic website. And I'm glad to see, Principal Chief David Hill does a nice job there at Muskogee Nation, wise leader of the Muskogee people. And you may or may not have heard that Governor Kevin Stitt vetoed a bill that had been a long time working its way through the state legislature, which would allow overall Native students to wear tribal regalia at graduation ceremonies. But he vetoed it. Some would say he did it as an arch conservative, not wanting students to be any different from one another, or the idea of local control so that the local school board would make that decision. It wouldn't happen at the state level. On the other hand, he's also had a lot of political arguments with people in the legislature, and he has intentionally vetoed stuff because they won't give him what he wants. In addition to that, he has, even though he's an enrolled citizen of the Cherokee Nation, he does not have a good track record with regard to his interaction with tribes up to this point, and this was not a positive move on his part. Now, to say one good thing about something he did maybe a year or two ago, sign the legislation to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, so he did go that far. But here's what the Principal Chief of Muskogee Nation says about the governor's veto of the Native American Regalia Bill. It's unfortunate that once again we're addressing an issue with Indigenous students wearing tribal regalia to honor their academic achievement and accomplishments at graduation. When students choose to express the culture and heritage of their respective nations to signify this moment in their lives, it's not to demand special favor to wear whatever they please. It's to honor their identity. We must continue to communicate the unique aspect of this honor, and that allowing this expression is in no manner a gateway to introduce chaos and irreverence into formal ceremonies. The overwhelming support of this bill among legislators should be a clear message that more and more people are understanding the message. Laws are made to protect these rights. It's time that once and for all we do the right thing by these students and respect their family choices. We're disappointed the governor is standing in the way of that with his veto. Strike 58 for Governor Stitt. Osage Nation have a really nice website. I see the Lindy Waters III Foundation Basketball Clinic registration is now open. If you're Osage and interested in that clinic, here you have Osage Nation recommending Senate Bill 429 regarding tribal regalia. So obviously Osage Nation was in favor of it and recommends that the legislature override the governor's veto. So tribes, there's two now coming out against the veto that the governor made earlier this week. Also our neighbors, Pawnee Nation, just over in Pawnee, always have a very active website. Looks like there's a spring community hand game coming up on May 28th. And I saw some of these stories. Here's the Pawnee Nation Health Fair. And looks like that's coming up June 29th. So the Pawnee folks getting ready for a lot of summer activities. Here's a diabetes screening fair, May 25th. Of course, diabetes is a primary issue in Indian country as a whole. And I saw today that our state is the fourth most obese state in the United States, with almost a half of our residents being obese. I won't really get into all of that, but Pawnee Nation doing some health activities, which are really good. We'll look at the Delaware, and of course this is the Delaware in north of Bartlesville. They're in the Copan area. And we can go to their news and events and see if they have any listed. There's the May 23 Lenape Word of the Day calendar is up. Some program applications for ARPA funds. Teton Trade Cloth by Lenape seeks candidates for board of directors. Okay, so a few things happening there with regard to the Delaware. And then also my friends and relatives down at south of Stroud at the Sac and Fox Nation, the Sauk people, you can get to the very current newsletter. There it is, May 23rd issue. The Jim Thorpe celebration happened. And I wonder how big I can make this. I don't know if I can make that full screen right now, so I'm not going to try it too much. But we can find out the things that are happening in Sac and Fox Nation by downloading this. It's kind of, I don't think it'd be too hard. We'll see how quick we can do the, Sac and Fox paper. There it is. And so here you see Rob Doherty, a member of Cherokee Nation, pictured at Jim Thorpe Day, celebrating his extensive collection of baseball and other sports cards and sports memorabilia. He's been collecting cards featuring Native American athletes since he was in the 7th grade. And there you see him there with all of that memorabilia. Emmy Award winner Robert Wheeler holds a book his father gave him at age 10 that inspired him to research Jim Thorpe's life and career for the past 68 years. Here's absentee Shawnee artist Nick Blanchard, pictured in full regalia in front of the mural he painted on the front of one of the 5 air-conditioned comfort stations in Jim Thorpe Memorial Park. The Shawnee, Oklahoma resident is working on multiple murals to be painted on various exterior walls on the comfort stations, and he is hoping to have the murals completed in time for the 58th annual Sac and Fox Nation Powwow. And so those are all down at the grounds there in Stroud. And there's those, that's one of the murals. Very nice. Okay, so we'll go a little further south, down to Choctaw Nation. Also, friends and relatives there. And right up front, I see a new video here on Choctaw language being an important part of the culture. It's just 1:30, and this is a new one we haven't seen yet, so let's check that out.
Halito. In order to preserve our sovereignty, faith, family, and culture, it is important to the Choctaw Nation that our language be promoted and protected. We will be doing something special with this video and my upcoming blogs on the Choctaw Nation website. All of my blogs going forward will be in English and Choctaw so that you can have another outlet to learn the Choctaw language. I hope this effort will be helpful in your journey to become Choctaw fluent. Also, in another way to promote the Choctaw language, we're launching a new program for our associates to increase usage of Choctaw language greetings and salutations. These greetings and salutations: Halito, hello, Yako Ki, thank you, and Chapi Salach Ki, until we meet again, are to be used every day as a standard when interacting with our guests. We also have a Choctaw language page set up on the Choctaw Nation website if you would like to learn more. Just check out the link below. As a challenge, help us preserve our Choctaw language and culture in order to keep the Choctaw Nation strong and sovereign. Yako Ki, Chapisalachi Ki, and God bless.
Okay, nice video. That's also very interesting because what now Choctaw Nation is starting to do when they talk about their guests and their gaming facilities and that sort of thing, everybody that works there is going to have to at least know how to say hello, thank you, and we'll see you later. And that's kind of a basis, for beginning the language being used everywhere. We'll continue with some more of our neighbors. Again, friends and relatives, Otoe, Missouri tribe up in Red Rock. And let's see what they have going on. The Otoe War Mothers met recently to begin work on custom honor blankets. They'll be adding original ribbon work and bead work to already embroidered honor blankets bearing the name and service information of their warriors. And that is a really nice looking round dance up here at the top part of the page. And looks like Way Back When is an online social media series that shares historical facts, locations, photos, videos, interviews about the Otoe, Missouri people. Let's see what happens if we click on that. Oh, this is cool. This is all kind of new too. The Pipestone National Monument, how Missouri got its name from the Otoe, Missouri, homecoming, the 7 clans of the Otoe. One of the things I learned, the Buffalo Clan is supposed to stay back and not do anything, even in ceremonies and activities. Just watch, be the observers, both to learn what's happening and also just be that distant observer point of view. So, okay, so Otoe, Missouri tribe, head up to White Eagle and check out the Ponca site. They again have a very nice header up here on their website with the Fancy Dancer. And of course, a lot of the fancy dance tradition comes right out of the Ponca world. And you see here, next year it'll be the 147th annual Ponca celebration where they have the Fancy Dance World Championships. And I was seeing, this is nice the way they have have everything set up. And they have not yet updated for the next one. I was seeing if there was a event calendar is kind of how they're doing it. Just had their, let's see, Teal to Heal awareness walk. Okay. So there's Poncas. The Kaw, who formerly called the Kanza. People of the South Wind, looks like they have an opening for their Attorney General. Job openings. A section on Kanza culture, language, history, news and media. Let's see how their current events are going. Offices are closed today. May 20th, the 7th Annual Youth Language Powwow on May 20th. And then the Kaw Powwow, June 16th. These are the Washunga Days Powwow, Kaw Nation Powwow. June 16th, 17th. It's real beautiful. It's right by the lake there. Really nice. And of course, it is the Kanza from whom the state of Kansas takes its name. Also like to check in with the Tonkawa. Oh, they have a word of the month. It means Rio people. Tichkunwatich. Tichkunwatich. Means real people. Here's an older newsletter. News and events. Let's see if we have anything new. They still have a little ways to go to update their situation. Tonkawa are a smaller group. They're just west of Ponca City. Ultimately from Texas, related to the Lipan Apache. Keep going. The Cheyenne Arapahoes out in western Oklahoma. And the last time we checked on this, we looked at some of the things going on with their bison herd. Looks like these are all from the end of March. Drinking water. Some other stories related to language and culture. Let's see what they have on their quick links. These are all for tribal citizens. We'll go to the news page and see what we get. Those are the same stories. Okay. I always like to take a quick look at Cheyenne Arapaho TV, just because they have all these really solid features that they've put together. And last week we watched the buffalo tagging and vaccination. Looks like there's an elders meeting here. Let's see what that looks like.
We had our first elders meeting for the 2023 year. And it's usually towards the end of the month. The reason why I chose the end of the month is because during the first of the month, they got help. They got their monies coming in. So towards the end of the month, their monies deplete. So this comes in, they can eat a hot meal, and they can sit and conversate with each other and get to know more of what's going on with the tribe and bringing the programs here to us.
Our goal is to get our tribal members of all ages enrolled in Sooner Care. That's our number one goal.
We had invited speakers out here from Nutrition Center, Vivian Lime, and we also had speakers here from the Pathways, which is a new Pathways grant that they got from the tribe and really reaches out to a lot of our elders for medical issues and stuff. And also we had George Hawkins Treatment Center here,
All our families.
Winifred Mendeville, and then we also had Ann Wilson here, Ashcraft from EMS.
I try to promote to call 911 and request Cheyenne and Arapaho ambulance. You just make sure and tell them that you want us. They should know where we're at. And if we're here, we'll respond to your call.
I like what I hear here. My name is Donald Beartrack. I'll return back. So glad to see everybody.
Thank you. I had an open floor for them to ask questions, and we did the door prizes, and I'm just thankful that we had the programs show up tonight and being here for the elders and letting them voice their concerns and opinions that we have for the district, and hopefully be able to have more come and show up for our next meeting.
All All right, nice work by the Cheyenne Arapaho TV. I'm going to skip the Ouachita Battlefield site today. That, of course, is the historic battlefield or massacre site, as we can also call it, where Custer attacked the peaceful Cheyenne village and is an important historical place, especially for the Cheyenne people, but for all Americans. In the Southwest, of course, we would check on our friends and relatives with the Kiowa tribe and see if there's anything going on in particular that's like brand new that we need to know about. And I'm not seeing a story that's like brand new. Kiowa tribe said it's the first tribe in Oklahoma to provide its members with cybersecurity training opportunities. At the end of a 16-week course, participants will be paired up with jobs. 10 tribal citizens were selected to take this course, paid for by the tribe. Oh, it looks like the Kiowas came up and visited the Osage Nation meat processing plant. So there you see some intertribal sharing going on there. We'll check in on, again, friends and relatives, and I say that every time just because I have so many friends and relatives all around Indian country. And, of course, we talk about relatives a little differently in Indian country. And I say that with all respect to my friends and relatives. Let's see, Comanche Nation. Looks like they have an election coming up. And if we were to go to departments news, let's see what we have in Comanche Nation news. Looks like the election's the big story now. And that is what's primarily on the news for the Comanches at this time. We'll go on down to, we have a few more of these. You can see how it takes a while just to go through. Wichita Tribe, Elders Lawn Service. Time to start mowing yards again. The elders need help. Looks like some of their students did well in a quiz bowl. I'll have to scoot through these now to be able to get through them all. Caddo, this is a new website for them. Looks good. Here's the Caddo census, community news and announcement. Caddo Culture Club graduation dance was just a couple weeks ago. So that's really nice the way that looks. Of course, that's the traditional grass house that the Caddo and the Wichita also lived in. And of course, the other Delaware nation is the Western Delaware. And they are out in western Oklahoma, just north of Anadarko. St. Tammany Day. I wonder what that is. Was the Native American chief of the Lenni Lenape tribe, which is the Delaware, which resided in the Delaware Valley during the 17th century. It was Tammany who first met with William Penn in 1683 under the branches of an enormous elm just north of present-day Philadelphia and agreed to peace with Pennsylvania's original Quaker settlers that would last for over a century. St. Tammany Day is May 1st, 2023. So, Delaware chief. We've seen this photograph many times. Interesting. They recognize that. Okay, just, we could keep doing this all morning. I'm going to click into each one. Right now, the Plains Apache site is down, or Apache Tribe Oklahoma site's down, so I just send this to the Wikipedia page for information. We would also look at the Warm Springs, Fort Sill, Chiricahua Apache. The group descended from Geronimo, see if they have any current news. And I'm not seeing anything immediately there that's immediate. Chickasaw Nation always have a very powerful website. Hall of Fame ceremony. Chickasaw word game. Anompa, a word game. Free word puzzle game. There's new Chickasaw Nation health and wellness website as well. If we were to go to news, that would take us down quite a number of paths. That's 13 minutes. We don't have time to watch that. But here you see Arts Festival in Sulphur and various other activities Chickasaw are doing. There's quite a bit to go through on their site. Citizen, that says, so this should be Citizen Potawatomi, not Citizen Pawnee. I got the link right anyway. And I was seeing if they had anything in particular. Let's go to their news. Potawatomi artist adds indigenous flair to tattoos. So this is a Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation citizen who owns the Analog Electric Tattoo Store in Oklahoma City, or shop, I guess we might say that. Okay, got to keep moving. I'll fix that on the slide. Seminole Nation. Their events coming. Summer Sports Camp application. Statement on Governor Stitt. Governor Stitt's actions to veto SB 429 are not a surprise. With the full support of Attorney General Drummond, my expectation is public schools will continue adopting graduation policies and fulfill the intentions of SB 429. Public schools don't need a law to do what's right and in the best interest of Native students. Brian T. Palmer, Assistant Chief. That's a telling statement right there. Governor Stitt's actions to veto SB 429 are not a surprise. I kind of felt the same way. Of course, there's three different Shawnee entities: the Absentee Shawnee, the Shawnee Tribe of Oklahoma, and the Eastern Shawnee. In the interest of time, we're not going to look at those websites today. Everyone should be able to go to the U.S. Senate Committee on Indian Affairs and keep up with what's happening at the federal level. And you can do that on that site. Same with the Department of Interior, where you can go to the BIA and see all of the things that are going on in the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Indian Gaming, Economic Development, and so forth. We'll skip on down. I usually have a slide on indigenous human history where I go through just how long humans have been around and what we know and what we've found. From 3.2 million years ago, which is the Lucy skeleton that we know about as the oldest human skeleton that comes from Africa, and then a descending sequence of years up to a more recent discovery of a 7,000-year-old site in Miami, Florida. And when we talk about Native history, you know, we do bring the scientific and anthropological in, keeping in mind that there are plenty of Native oral histories that tell us just a valid, if not even more important story about Native people's perspectives of where they came from. And what's really fascinating academically is when the science finally catches up with the oral history, and we've seen that happen a number of times. I've brought this book up before, Between Two Fires. We had a visit from J.D. Colbert, the author, who looks at the way in which Tulsa essentially was taken away from many Native people by unscrupulous oil magnates who had all the money and wanted the real estate. And so a lot of negative things happened there, analogous to what happened with Killers of the Flower Moon story that comes out of Osage country and all of the murders that happened there during that era. And we'll bring that back up in a second. But this is a fictionalized account of what happened. So Mr. Colbert wrote a story surrounding the two characters on the book. It's got a romance story, but it deals with all these issues that happened when this land was taken away from the Muskogee people. That became Tulsa, South Tulsa, Glenpool, Sand Springs, all of that. This is a very interesting book. I've just about gotten through it, The Dawn of Everything, that looks at the way Cahokia, the Mississippian site, essentially was the basis for initial tribal freedoms, because people got tired of the stranglehold that was on Cahokia and started moving away and relocating, and brought in this whole concept of disobeying or ignoring commands issued by others. The freedom, this whole freedom shaped new social realities for Native people that ultimately lead to something like the Iroquois Confederacy that has its own influences on the framers of our early Constitution. So a very interesting book there. With regard to indigenous arts, sometimes I'll look at the Native American Museum in Bentonville, Arkansas, or the First American Museum in Oklahoma City. I'd also indicate that Cherokee Nation now has this incentive for people to make films here with Native participants, either acting or on the crew and that sort of thing. And we now know that Killers of the Flower Moon should debut this month at Cannes, the famous film festival, and then will come out in the fall and streaming by late fall. In addition to that, Reservation Dogs is shooting now in Oklahoma. Various occurrences have happened in this around here, the Tulsa metropolitan area, Okmulgee, Muskogee, and we can say now that some scenes will be shot on the campus of Rogers State University in the next couple weeks. So that's exciting for us here at RSU. There's several American Indian language projects going on. I won't go through these, but they're very important with regard to our identity issues. The Oklahoma Powwow Trail is a really good way to keep up with powwows around the state, and that specifically links right to Facebook. I'm not going to go there at this point, but one current event story I always like to bring up is the mascot issue, which is still here, especially at the public school level, and there's a primary website that we check out with regard to this subject matter, American Indian Sports Team Mascots, and it's an aggregate news site that keeps track of all these stories. Use of Native American team names challenged in Minnesota. All New York schools are getting ready to replace Native American names and mascots. Last Michigan school votes to retire slur word mascot in Long Island. Here's one in South Bend, Indiana, retiring the Indians nickname. So a lot of this is going on, and it's still a current issue. Even though some things have changed at the national level, a lot has not changed at the local public school level outside of, and kudos to, Tulsa Union, who made a change, and the high school in South Oklahoma City that made the change, both of whom had this word as their logo and now have gotten rid of it. But I always bring up this concept that, you know, we typically say, and all the research says, that stereotyping is negative, especially for Native American youth. And this is where our state leadership needs some education. I would point out our high school state superintendent doesn't have a clue about this and many other issues. And he would say that I am a left-wing radical bent on indoctrination. In fact, what I'm trying to do is spell things out in a logical academic way so we can get away from the knee-jerk emotional responses that are essentially dog whistles, political dog whistles, and we hear that over and over again from the superintendent. But what we're finding out now is the law that was written to prevent critical race theory from being taught in the high schools may also be used to indicate that Native American mascots are illegal in the public school environment because of the reasons I won't go into here, but we'll bring that up. In addition to that, teaching the Declaration of Independence is illegal according to the law because of the way it describes savages, Native people as savages in the Declaration of Independence. But I want to bring up the Sac and Fox because they're working with the Chicago Blackhawks on the Chicago Blackhawk team name and logo. Why? Because Blackhawk was a Sac and Fox chief, and Chicago was traditionally Sauk land. I believe Chicago translates into something close to the smelly place. Why is that? Because along the Great Lakes there, it was overrun with wild onions in the spring, and you could smell it from a long distance away is how you knew you were getting closer to it. So Chicago means the smelly place in the Sauk language. All right, we're right about to the end of all this, and typically I try and offer some words of encouragement to all of our students to continue to explore this subject matter. I realized as I went through this, I adjusted my slides and I took out the one environmental slide that I wanted, and I think it's important for us to keep in mind the environmental issues going on in Indian country, although we did see a little bit of it at the beginning with the discussion of mining regarding the legislator, congressperson who was arguing with Secretary Deb Haaland. That is going to wrap it up for this semester. I'll be back in the fall with cinema, and next spring again with Native Americans of North America. So until then, we'll use the word we learned today, Yakoki from the Choctaw, thank you. And in the Muskogee world, we say Madohadamchi Chatlis. Thank you, and we'll see you again, of course, in Cherokee. Thank you is Wado, so we'll say Wado, and see you down the road.